to you real quick.
We'll go with it.
Rolling yet?
Okay, I'm ready. You guys ready? All right, we already got the marker and everything? Okay, good. When you found out you were going to be one of the youngest congressmen ever, like, I got a feeling like, I don't know how you get a bigger ego than that. No?
Well, you have to remember, people focus on Congress, but I actually was elected when I was 19 to my local school board. And I had served 4 years on the school board, was elected to the state legislature when I was 22 as the youngest member there, and served 2 terms there. So by the time I was elected to Congress at 27, I had already been in elected office for 8 years. And I was a little bit used to people coming in and saying, "Oh, Representative, that was brilliant, that was great," and you start to, get pretty good at seeing through the BS and recognizing that in politics, it's a team sport. Everybody in the Capitol has an ego. They ran for office. They put their name out there. They think pretty highly of themselves. And I learned in the state legislature that the only way you pass a piece of legislation is you got to get a majority of those egos to agree with you. And so you can't be the biggest ego in the room, and you can't allow, the enemy, the perfect to be the enemy of the good. You can't believe that, like, my idea is the best and I'm not going to be willing to modify it all, or you won't ever get anything done.
Do I get this right? You were in the state legislature with Obama?
Yeah, he was a state senator and I was a state representative.
Wow. Did you know him well or no?
I wouldn't say I knew him well. He did invite me when he was elected to the United States Senate to his swearing in, and I went out there, attended the swearing in, and then his swearing in party, which was in one of the Library of Congress buildings. And then when he was a U.S. senator and he would travel to my legislative district as a state rep, he would invite me to join him at press conferences and the like. And then when he was elected to president in 2008, and I was elected to the Congress at the same time in 2008, one of his first trips as president on Air Force One was promoting the stimulus bill, and he came to Peoria, Illinois, my hometown. He came to Caterpillar World Headquarters in my hometown, and he invited me to join him on Air Force One to fly back to my hometown, which was a pretty neat experience as a new member of Congress. Really for anyone to fly with the president, but in that situation.
Yeah, so for all you 27-year-olds out there wondering what you're doing with your life, what have you accomplished by the time you were 27? I'm mesmerized by the story. For those of you who don't know who we're talking to, Congressman Aaron Schock, you served how long in Congress?
So I was first elected in 2008, and I was elected to 4 terms, and I quit in my 4th term. So 6 years and 3 months. Wow,
that's amazing. I'm kind of blown away by your story, and so I was kind of hoping we could talk about. This is a show about people who, I like personally, who have made something happen for themselves. Maybe they were self-starters, or they didn't exactly have like a straight road to something. But you were a young entrepreneur. I want to kind of skip to the fact how you got elected the first time. I think it's a fascinating story. I wondered if you could tell it, kind of take your time telling that story, because I think this is an example of thinking outside the box for those people who are young and in business and who are, sometimes I get people that kind of feel a little sorry for themselves. Mm-hmm. I realized what you did was pretty amazing at a young age.
Well, I think what I find with successful people like yourself in business is sometimes we're just too stupid to think we could fail. And we're willing to push the limits, and we're willing to see. And by the way, we fail, right? I mean, every successful person
Sure.
I know fails. And I think one of the problems some people have is they look at successful people and then they look at their own failures and think, well, I could never be that person because of the mistakes or the failures I've had. No, the difference between highly successful people and people who don't become highly successful is the people who are highly successful continue to learn from their failures, push through their failures, and never give up.
Yeah, those people who know me know I've had some failures, but it is a process of, I agree with you, of not giving up even when you have failed temporarily, right?
Yeah.
It's a state, a short-term
And
effect.
that's really the heart of my first election story was I was an entrepreneur at heart. I loved making money. I loved starting businesses, and I had all my high school credits a year early. I was done with my 3rd year in high school, all my high school credits. I got accepted to the University of Illinois accounting program. I wanted to go to college early. And my school board, I went to public schools, said I couldn't go because they were going to lose the money that our school system got in state aid, which was about $6,000. And long story short, I went to the public school board meeting. I tried to write them a check for the $6,000, and the school system wouldn't take my money. And they made me take PE class my senior year. I went to class for 1 hour to take my PE credit, and I was so upset with the school board president, coincidentally, whose daughter was my age, but I went to middle school with, but she was sending her daughter to a boarding school in Indiana, so we weren't getting any money from the state aid for that. And it really stuck in my craw, and I thought it was, a double standard that she could do for her daughter that which she wouldn't do for me, which was allow me to advance in my education, what was best for me. I ran against the school board president. You need petitions signed to get on the ballot. Nobody in my family had ever been in politics. My family's not a political family. And when I told my parents I was going to run for the school board, they said, are you crazy? Come on, stay focused on school.
You're 19.
Don't get into politics. You're 19. So they weren't going to help me. So I went door to door by myself. I got 250 signatures. You need 200 to get it on the ballot. I filed them myself. A week later, a sheriff's deputy shows up on my doorstep with a summons to appear in court. And I thought, what did I get myself into? The school board president had hired an attorney to challenge my petitions on the basis of people using ditto marks. So the husband would sign 123 Main Street, City of Peoria, State of Illinois. The wife would sign 123, and they'd put ditto marks under State of Illinois, whatever.
What's a ditto mark?
A ditto mark is just like, repeat what's above.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And which is, by the way, legal.
Okay, yeah.
It's legal.
Sorry, little brain fart.
State law at the time said that if you challenge someone's petitions for school board, it goes before a committee of its peers. So 3 of her cohorts on the school board were the official election judges, and it didn't take them long to decide, those aren't ditto marks, they're straight lines, and the intent of the signer isn't clear, and therefore you have less than 250 valid signatures, less than 200 valid signatures, and you're thrown off the ballot. So 2 months before Election Day, front page of my paper, hometown paper, teen off ballot for board seat, the election's over, and the school board president thinks she's won a victory. And the newspaper reporter at the time, who was at my house writing this, the debrief, if you will, on my demise, says, well, there is one other way you can run. They never win, but it's a write-in campaign where people have to write their name on the ballot. And being 19 and naive, I said, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run as a write-in. So the next day I have a news conference, and I announce to the community that they still have a choice, that I'm going to be running, and over the next couple months, I'm going to be going door to door. And I had 15 moms of my siblings or my friends in school call me and say, this is outrageous, we want to help. And I said, meet me at the public library on Saturday. So we rented out the community room, and for every night after school for that whole 2 months, we knocked on doors. And in 2 months, we knocked on 13,000 doors. And on Election Day, we got 6,406 people to write my name accurately on the ballot and beat the school board president by 60%.
I'm almost dumbfounded that it's almost too good to be true. Talk about the story about how you went in front of the precincts and had the card.
Yeah, well, so I was mindful of what people were telling me when I went door to door, and people that were kind of the experts. The conventional wisdom of politics was, okay, kid, you're 19. People are going to tell you that they're going to vote for you. And then they're going to get into the ballot box. So they're going to forget to vote for you because your name's not on the ballot. They're going to forget how to spell your name because your name's not on the ballot. All of these reasons you're never going to get the votes you need as a write-in. So I researched what you can do on Election Day. And what you can do on Election Day is you can pass out flyers. You can put yard signs at the precincts. However, you can't do anything 100 feet from the door of the room where the voting is occurring. Well, most voting occurs in a church, in a post office, in a school, and oftentimes the door of the room where the voting's going on is down the hallway from the entrance. So 100 feet from that door of that room where the voting's going on is oftentimes right outside the front door of the church, of the school, you name it. So I identified the 50 precincts that were going to be voting, and I got volunteers from 6 in the morning to 7 o'clock at night to man every precinct in the city, passing out sample ballots that I'd gotten from the City Election Commission, and my name was used as the sample ballot. Check the box and write in Aaron Schock for school board. and we could legally pass those out to people, and then they could, on their own volition, bring that with them into the voting booth and use it as a reference as they did the voting card. So they were being reminded, even though they saw me or a supporter on their doorstep, as they went into the polling place, remember to vote for Aaron Schock for school board, to write his name in, and this is how you do it. And that really was, I think, what helped us do the unthinkable, which was to win a write-in campaign that had never happened in the state of Illinois.
At 19.
At 19.
Yeah, we got to dwell on that a little bit. That's incredible.
But, looking back, people would have thought, why did you think you could win? Well, because I looked at the last election, and the last election, there were only 2,000 votes cast for the school board race. And so I thought I needed 1,000 yard signs, and that would mean I'd get 2 votes per household, and that would mean I'd get 2,000 votes. So I got 1,000 yard signs and 1,000 yards. What I didn't know was these were 5-year terms, and the last election cycle, there was only one thing on the ballot, which was school board. This election cycle, it was a mayoral race. So there were more people voting because it was a mayor's race and a school board race. So there were 11,000 votes cast. If I would have ever thought there were going to be 11,000 people voting instead of 2,000 people voting, I probably wouldn't have run, because I wouldn't have thought I could get 6,000 people to write my name on the ballot. But sometimes
you got 6,000 people to do something, which is incredible. People can barely remember to do anything.
And Aaron Schock isn't exactly Bob Smith.
Right.
You got to spell Schock correctly. And there were ballots that were thrown out because the name wasn't spelled correctly.
Really?
Yeah.
That's I kind of get this anti-vote thing. By the way, they know what they implied what they wanted to do.
Right.
But maybe something was in the right place. So what was the attitude like of the school board member who lost? You were friends with her daughter.
It wasn't pleasant. She actually moved out of town, and she moved to Florida, and she gave an interview when she left that she had been publicly humiliated and that she was moving to Florida. And she actually ran a child care. She was a president of the school board, and then she ran a separate child care facility in town. She's a big education person, supposedly. And so she left town. She was not, once I was elected, you go to the meetings and you sit in executive session and you play the role as board member for 2 months before you're sworn in,
mm-hmm.
and before they leave. And so you're in the room with the person you beat, which was awkward. And what was also awkward was she was the second youngest member. She was 54.
Mm-hmm.
There was one guy who was 52, 2 in their 60s and 2 in their 70s. And to tell you that I added a little diversity was an understatement. The night I was sworn in as a school board member at 19 years old, the woman next to me was serving her 20th year on the school board. She was elected a year before I was born. And so, 2 in their 70s, 2 in their 60s, some in their 50s, and then I'm at 19. So they made me the chairman of the budget committee. They had 6 years of deficit budgets. And I set out on a course. I was a finance major at that point. It was the best senior study program I could have. And by my second year as budget chairman, we balanced the budget.
Did anyone believe that you got, your friends, did they really believe you got elected? It had
Well,
to be
of course,
it was
a big story in town, because everybody saw this. They saw me get taken to court. They saw me get removed from the ballot. Then they saw me continuing to run door to door. And, word started traveling over that 2 months that I was running door to door, and the TV cameras started following me going door to door. And then, of course, when I got 6,000 people to do the write-in, that was in national news when it happened.
In the same spot that you got elected to the school board, was that the same spot where you were elected to Congress? Were the same voters, those 6,000 people
Yes.
that already knew you?
Yeah. And that's really my tenure on the school board was, I would say, somewhat of a controversial one, because I was balancing the budget. I coincidentally had to fire a superintendent because of things she had been doing that weren't kosher. Unfortunately, she was the first female and the first African-American superintendent we had, so I got drug into a racial discrimination lawsuit, and I refused to settle, and we won that. But that came with some scars and bruises. So it wasn't just your average school board presidency. It was a tumultuous one, but being young and holding my ground and winning more than losing during that time earned me support and respect from the community that then allowed me to run for the state legislature when I was 22 against an 8-year incumbent. And I was running in the district I was a Republican at this point. The school board was nonpartisan. I ran as a Republican in a district that had never elected a Republican in the history of the state. And most of these Democrat voters would tell you they voted for me not because I had an R behind my name, because they were Democrats. They voted for me because of my work on the school board. They believed I was a hard worker. They believed that my yes was yes and my no was no, and they could trust me. And they believed that I would look out for my hometown of Peoria more than any party affiliation. But that race was the most expensive House race in Illinois history, because Illinois Democrats don't lose House seats because they control the state with a stronghold. And they spent over $1 million on attack ads against me, which is a lot of money for a state rep race. 40,000 votes cast, and I won by 235 votes. They took me to court. They ordered a recount, and I gained 2 votes in the recount. But that race taught me, just as my school board race, that every frickin' vote counts. And people would say to me, oh, I don't know if it really matters whether I vote. I say, listen, I won my state rep race by 235 votes. 40,000 votes cast. Every chili supper I went to, every pancake fry, every door I knocked on, every community neighborhood association endorsement made the difference. And it also makes you, I think, a better representative when you realize that every group that comes in, every constituent meeting you take matters, because they ultimately determine whether you stay or go.
It's amazing. I almost don't know what to say. I'm trying to think about what I was doing when I was 20 years old. I mean, I wanted to work on Wall Street, but I was not as, I thought I was a pretty determined guy, but you take the cake. So you got in the state legislature. Does that mean you had to leave the school board?
Interesting question. I did not leave the school board. It was not a requirement, and I was the school board president at that time, and we were going through a executive search for our superintendent, and I wanted to see that through. And so being on the school board and being in the state legislature was not a conflict of interest. School board was a non-paid volunteer position, and the state legislature was technically a part-time job. I continued to do real estate development while I was in the state legislature. And so I stayed on the school board for about 6 months while I was sworn in as a state rep. I was still the school board president, got the new superintendent hired.
Going to college too.
Yeah. Got my finance. I actually graduated while I was the school board president with a finance degree. And then.
So not very busy.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't have much of a life outside of my responsibilities, but I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
You were developing real estate though at a young age, right? So you really had a busy schedule. This is why I wanted you to do this podcast. Now, obviously, I'm not naive enough to think that once you're elected as one of the youngest congressmen ever, the story hasn't been told before, but I think it needs to be retold because you were already developing real estate, right?
Yeah. I think probably you're right. I mean, if somebody knows my story, it's usually, he was a young congressman, or, he got elected at such a young age to the Congress. And what I would often tell school groups, because they'd come to see me out in D.C. and they'd say, hey, how do I run for Congress when I'm 26? And I'd say, well, everybody can do it differently, but running for Congress at 26 wasn't my first step on the road, right? I'd already been in office for 8 years. So, for me, running for school board was not my life ambition. My life ambition was to be successful in business, was go to college early. And I really ran for government because government got in my way. I ran to change the school system, which I did. I ran so that we have an early graduation program, which we now have in my public school system. And not only do we let you out of high school early, I made it so that we use the state aid to help fund your classes in college. So it's a win-win. So, my goal when I was younger was I wanted to get to college early. I bought my first piece of real estate when I was in high school, about 110 acres of farm ground. I was going to start a gravel pit, and then the sanitary district tried to take it away from me through eminent domain. I sold that for a profit. Then I was able to buy rental property around the university I was attending. The university had to expand. I got lucky again. They had to buy my rental property.
But your parents wouldn't sign off on the first property, right?
Right.
That first gravel pit?
Right. They didn't think owning a gravel pit was a real good idea.
So ultimately, though, then you had to get the guy to extend a little bit until you turned 18?
I bought the real estate 2 days after I turned 18.
Just mesmerized. I'm too much of a fanboy, I think, right now. This is crazy stuff. So you buy real estate when you're younger. You buy real estate around the university you're at.
Right.
So you're going to school. You're on the school board. You're doing real estate transactions.
Right.
You get in the state legislature. How long were you in the state legislature for?
4 years, 2 terms. I'd just been elected to my second term. So my first term, as I mentioned, was very contentious, right? I won by 235 votes. I get elected as the youngest member. I'm in the minority, right? So I'm a Republican with a Democratic House, Democratic Senate, Democratic governor, and everybody says, take a back seat. You know, you're not going to get anything done. Well, much like you, if somebody says you're not going to do something,
Right.
it's like, you know, Katie bar the door, I'm going to freaking do it, you
I'm
know?
gonna do this.
And so I went around to every one of the state reps that were chairman of the committees, Democratic chairman, introduced myself. I went around to all of the business groups and the social service agencies in my district. So I had 40,000 voters, 20,000 on food stamps. It's a very poor district.
Wow.
And I asked them, hey, if you were the state rep for the day, what would you do that would make your business more efficient, your community college more efficient, your Meals on Wheels program, or some, you know, social service agency? What part of state government doesn't make sense for you? And it was amazing the good ideas that I got back from the community college president, from the Chamber of Commerce, from the Habitat for Humanity director. You know, if the state would let us do this, if the state would let us do that. I took those ideas back to Springfield, the state capital, and I met with the various committee chairmen, and I said, hey, this was an idea brought to me by my community college president. And the committee chairman said, you know what? That's a really good idea. And I'd say, well, if I introduce it, would you co-sponsor it with me? Absolutely. And in my first term in the state legislature, I passed over 20 pieces of legislation in the House, and Rob Blagojevich, who was my governor, signed 18 bills into law, which was more legislation than any Democrat or Republican in the legislature. And I was in the minority.
Wow.
And they weren't hyper-partisan legislation. They obviously had to be bipartisan in order for me to get it passed. But to me, it spoke to the fact that most people in units of government run because they want to get things done, right? And I was able to get a lot done on the school board. I was able to get a lot done in the state legislature. I wasn't able to get as much legislation passed at the federal level because the Congress, as you watch on TV, is very slowly, right? They wait for a crisis. They wait for a deadline. They wait for the wheels to about fall off of something before they step in and act. And that was a very frustrating part for me when I went to the federal government. Was every week I'm getting on a plane from Illinois to D.C. to go out to the Capitol, and you're voting on legislation, much of which doesn't ever become law. You're having debates and arguments in committees over things that really oftentimes don't change. And so the heart of my work when I was in the Congress was really on constituent work. How do I advocate for the 200 towns that I represent and the people that live in them when the federal agency gets in the way or a federal government agency won't let them do what they need to do? I was their representative. I was their advocate. And I prided myself on good constituent services. And that ultimately is what let me continue to win re-election by bigger and bigger margins. When I was first elected to Congress in 2008, Obama ran for president the same year. And in my blue state of Illinois, he won my congressional district with 52%, and I won it with 59%. There was a good amount of crossover.
Wow.
But by the time I was elected to my fourth term in Congress, I had gone from winning with 59% to 65% to 72%, and my last election was 75%. And I will tell you, the way I did that was not because of my votes in Congress lining up with 75% of my district. You can't vote the right way enough, right? Because people are going to disagree with your votes. But it was the constituent work that I'd done, always responding to phone calls, always being willing to meet with people, always going to bat for them, that led people who, in many cases, were Democrats say, you know what, he's a Republican, I don't agree with all his votes, but I know he's the right kind of representative for my community. And that was the greatest pride I had. When somebody said, what are you most proud of? It wasn't one thing that I did. It was that I proved to my constituents that while I'm not going to be able to make you happy with every vote I take, rest assured, if you have a problem with the federal government or you have a problem with the state government, I'm going to be your biggest advocate.
At what point, like before you're 27, you get elected, you think, okay, I'm pretty important. I mean, where's your ego at this point?
You know, I tell a story. I'd only been to the Capitol a couple of times, the United States Capitol a couple of times before I was ever elected. I went when I was a kid with my parents on a family vacation. And then as a state legislator, I mentioned I went out for Obama's swearing in for U.S. Senate and a few other things I was invited to. So you walk in, and in the 6+ years I served in the Congress, there wasn't a day that I walked up the steps of the Capitol to go vote that I didn't get a shiver down my spine. I mean, it is an awe-inspiring. You walk into the rotunda; it's a historic place, right?
I mean, more people play professional sports. I mean, how many people
Yeah.
actually ever get elected to Congress? So few.
I mean, it's in the thousands. It's
I know
just-
they say, well, there's 435, whatever, but the reality is a lot of them stay for a long time, and over
Right.
the 200-year history of the country,
right,
there haven't been that many in the big scheme of things,
Right.
right? You're talking to
right.
very few.
Yeah, I mean, today we have 400 people that decide how 300 million people are going to live.
Yeah, it to me, it's inspiring. So
But-
you're
but
talking about walking up
I'm
to the
walking
steps.
in. I walk in to get sworn in. You know, and the lights are bright, and you're looking around, and you know, there's Nancy Pelosi, and there's John Boehner, and there's, you know, all the who's in Whoville, all the
Right.
people you see on TV, right? And I think, man, how did I get here?
Mm.
You know, you think, like, because I was just like a gerbil in a cage, right? I'm just working on the school board, working in the state legislature, working, you know, when I decided to run for Congress, it's just, you know, get elected. And then you're there and you get sworn in and you think, wow.
But how did you decide to run? Like, what was the? Was
Well, let
there
me finish my story.
Oh, sorry, sorry,
Because
sorry,
it's
sorry.
the punchline. I think, man, how did I get here?
Oh.
And then I meet the other 435 and I think, how did they get here? Right? So,
Right.
you know 20 of them, right? There's 435. You know the Maxine Waters, the Jim Jordans, the Kevin McCarthy's, the Steny Hoyers, the Nancy Pelosi's. You know the top echelon, if you will. There are a lot of members of Congress people don't know, right? And
Right.
it's a colorful cast. I mean, it's everybody runs for a reason, and you have to respect the reasons for running, but they're all various reasons. And you have people that are doctors and lawyers and school teachers and farmers. And, you know, I love to travel around the world. That's one of my things as a kid. I always, when I had money, I would take a vacation to a foreign country. And but I hadn't been to most states in the country. And so when you meet people from West Virginia and you people from Rhode Island and you meet people from Oregon, they're different, right? I mean, people from Northern California and people from you know, Waco, Texas, they're different,
Oh yeah.
right? And so you walk into this body. I've been used to being on the school board, right? Same town, same values by and large. State legislature, same state, kind of think the same. Of course, Northern Illinois is a little different than Southern Illinois, but you know, Illinois is a pretty homogenous state. You get to a Congress, and you got people with radically different views. The guys up in Alaska think a lot different than the people from Miami,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
And so that was really kind of the mind explosion. Was you think, gee, how did I get here? And then you go, well, how did these guys all get here, right? Because they all got a unique, funky story of what caused them to run. Sometimes they're from a political family. Sometimes they got pissed off at their incumbent and ran against them. But you realize very quickly that, you know, you're all there because 750,000 people back home showed up, chose you. And you have to respect each one of them and the perspective that they bring, because while I may not agree with them and I may think they're Looney Tune crazy, there's a majority of people back home that think they're spot on.
Back in your district, I mean, I'm skipping around a little bit, but back in your district, you get elected. With Peoria, Caterpillar's there. How many people are in your geographic area?
700. So each congressional district in America has 750,000 voter age population. So it doesn't include children or immigrants or people that can't vote.
So there's 750,000 people that you theoretically represent in
Correct.
your district.
Yeah.
How many
That
of those people did you meet? I mean, forget the kids, but like of the percentage of the people. I mean, I just moved to Nevada, but I lived effectively in Orange County. I never met my congressman.
Yeah.
How many people did
You
you
know, everybody decides to serve their district differently. So I know people who buy houses in D.C. and they get elected and they spend most of their weekends in D.C. and they only go back to their districts when it's closer to election time, or they may only go back to their district once a weekend, one weekend a month, for example. In the 6.5 years that I was in Congress, I spent 4 weekends in Washington, D.C. If I wasn't going back to my district every weekend, I was going to someone else's district to help them with their reelection, or sometimes a member of Congress would say, hey, come speak to my college campus because you're the youngest congressman, or I was on the Ways and Means Committee, so that somebody'd say, hey, come talk about tax policy to my business group. So I might be going to someone else's district, or otherwise I was always coming back to my district. I never stayed in D.C. The only time I stayed in D.C. was when the government shut down and we had to be there. when the Affordable Care Act passed and Pelosi kept us in Congress for several weeks while she rallied the votes. It was only when I had to stay there.
So she has the power to say, we're not going home this weekend. Everyone's staying.
Not only does she have the power to do it, that's how she was able to get the votes. And remember, when when the Affordable Care Act was passing, it was first dead. Scott Brown had won the Senate seat, the Ted Kennedy seat. He was going to be the 51st vote to stop the bill from coming back through the Senate. They passed the Affordable Care Act right before Christmas, knowing it was flawed, knowing it had a lot of issues. But the Senate said, we're going to pass it over to the House. They're going to amend it and fix it, and then it'll come back for ratification in the Senate. And when Scott Brown won the Senate seat, everybody said, oh, it's dead, right? That's why Massachusetts supposedly went and elected him, because he was going to be the 51st vote to stop it. And so for several months, people in Washington thought the Affordable Care Act was dead. And then Nancy Pelosi, out of the blue, has a press conference and says, I've got the votes, and we're going to pass the bill as is, into law, no amendments. And I mean, my mind was exploding. Are you kidding me? So I go to the House gym in the morning, 6 o'clock, and I'm going by all my Democratic friends. I'm going, hey, are you voting for this bill? Hell no, I'm not voting for that. Absolutely not. She doesn't have my vote. And I thought, I wonder how this is going to work, right? It's my first term in Congress. I'm a freshman. And she kept us in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday for 3 weeks. Now, you want to piss off somebody. You keep them away from their spouse for 3 weeks.
That's amazing.
Right? And their kids and their life back home. And one by one, either she or the president or the first lady at the time would call them into the Oval Office or call them in and say, hey, what do you need? And they picked off enough votes. Of course, they couldn't amend the bill, so who knows what they were getting in exchange
because they
for
don't
their
want to have
votes.
to send it back to the
Senate. If
right.
they had made any modifications, it would have had to go back to the Senate, and with Scott Brown's vote, they wouldn't have been able to get votes. So Pelosi, to her credit, while I didn't agree with it, she strong-armed enough members to pass the bill as is. And I say to this day, the Affordable Care Act became law not because of Barack Obama. The Affordable Care Act became law because of Nancy Pelosi.
Wow.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, that's crazy. I'm mesmerized with your story. There's going to have to be a part 2 and 3, I believe, because we're not even at the tip of the iceberg in terms of what you've accomplished. It's really amazing. So you're in your first year. Of course, you have to leave the state legislature because you're in Congress. You're off the school board at this point.
Yep.
You're a full-time congressman. I didn't know. I learned this from you, I think, last night. So there are congressmen or people, members of Congress,
Yes,
that live in their office.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of misperceptions about congressmen. First of all, people say, oh, you get health care for life. That's not true. Oh, you get your pension for life. That's not true. When Newt Gingrich and the Republican majority took over in 94, they really changed. They say they modernized the Congress. Really, they took away a lot of the juicy perks. So, a congressional salary is $172,000. And when you show up, you sit down with the benefits manager and they say, congratulations, welcome to Congress. You want health care. And of course, I was running for Congress and everybody said, oh, you got gold-plated health care. You got the best health care in the world. And so I said, well, yeah, I want health care. I thought you got health care. She says, no. She says, it comes out of your 172.
Really?
So your 172 is your gross pay that the taxpayers pay.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything comes out of that. So you want retirement? Well, yeah, okay. Well, you can put up to 15% of your income into a 401k, and the federal government will match a portion of that. So I had a 401k like most people in America that work for a big company. And so, all of that came out of my 172. So for a single guy, that's a healthy income, right? But if you're married with kids and you got a mortgage back in Wisconsin, or you live in New York, or you live in California, you're making $150,000 a year and you're paying for your life back home. And then you move to Washington, D.C. during the week and you got to pay for housing. So for a lot of people, they can't afford to have a house in D.C. or apartment in D.C. and a home or a mortgage or an apartment back in their district. So there's today about 80 members of Congress that literally sleep on the couch in their congressional office because they can't afford to rent a space in Washington, D.C.
Do you get, this seems obvious to me, but when you get elected, I know you have a staff, and do they give you a budget for your staff?
Yeah, you get a you get uh, a members representational allowance, an MRA they call it, and from that members representational allowance, you get to hire staff, you get to rent your office space, you get to pay for your official travel back and forth to DC, and then mail to your district when they write to you and you mail back your computer systems. Each congressional office is about $1.5 million a year. That and
You get
that's
$1.5 million a year budget?
about $1.5 million a year to pay for all your staff, your budgets, your office rent. For example, I had 205 towns in my district, so I had three offices spread out throughout the 205 towns, because you don't want somebody having to drive more than 3 hours if they need to meet with a caseworker about their Social Security benefits, or about their veteran benefits, or about their adoption that they're having trouble with, or you think of any federal agency that could go wrong, and trust me, every one of them has problems. Those people in your district that have a problem with that federal agency seek help from their representative. And you, the representative, can't meet with every one of them. So you have caseworkers, you have staff that does that. And then if there's a case that they can't solve, it'll bubble up to you as a congressman. And then you might have to call the agency director or the secretary of that agency and weigh in,
or
and try
Hillary
and get
Clinton,
their help, or the Secretary of State.
and
Sometimes.
we're gonna get to that story
Okay.
eventually. That's I just am fascinated that you're able to do this at such a young age, and then you're in Congress.
See,
you
now
got
I would argue
million-
it's amazing to me that some of those guys can do it at their old age.
I gotcha.
Right? I mean, I used to joke, I'm the youngest member of Congress. I'm not the dumbest member of Congress. In other words, people would often say, gee, how can you do it at such a young age? And granted, there were some things I couldn't do. I didn't have 50 years of life experience,
Sure.
but I had energy, determination, willpower. I look at guys that are in their 80s or in their 70s doing the job, and I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they have the stamina to run around their district, to show up to votes every day, to fly back to their district. And I'm actually more shocked that some of them are able to still manage.
Wow. And so when you were on Air Force One, you flew back to your area. You're going to go to Caterpillar. It's a stimulus bill. You're with Obama.
Mhm.
He's newly elected.
Mhm. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it had to be.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Yeah.
had to be like,
Yeah,
okay,
because
I'm the man.
it was not only the president who I knew from Illinois, but it was David Axelrod, right? His political guy was on there. Valerie Jarrett, right? His senior advisor. I mean, it was all the King's men on the plane. Reggie Love.
You're a Republican,
right?
But what was that like? I mean, Obama's bringing but it didn't matter, right? You were from Chicago.
Yeah, we knew each
area.
other. Yeah, we were friendly, and we all knew each other. That doesn't mean we were on the same team, obviously, but it wasn't like, David Axelrod obviously knew who I was. Valerie Jarrett knew who I was, because I was a state legislator. I'd just been elected the youngest congressman, so it wasn't like I was an unknown to these people. But ultimately, we didn't see eye to eye on the stimulus bill, primarily because despite the trip to Caterpillar, a lot of it wasn't spent on infrastructure. There was all these promises that it was going to be spent on infrastructure, yet today you can still see we have airports and roads and bridges that never got the money.
So, how does that happen? So he's president.
Yeah.
Who calls you? Like, who says, "Hey, Congressman, we want you to come on Air Force One"? Like, if you can remember back?
Yeah.
How does that take place?
Yeah. Well, my staff comes into my office and says, the White House Legislative Affairs Office. So within the White House, there's a Legislative Affairs Office, and their job is to work with the legislature, work with the Congress. So there's somebody within the White House that's assigned to my office just to reach out to me when there's issues important to the White House. So the First Lady has a bill on child care. The First Lady has an issue on school lunches, was a big passion for her. So they would come meet with me to advocate for the White House's position. So that person reached out to my chief of staff and said, the president wants to invite Congressman on Air Force One. And, here's where you go at Andrews Air Force Base. This is when you need to check in, and gives you all
You
the
don't say
details.
no.
You check your schedule and then you confirm.
Yeah, but you don't say no, right?
Exactly.
Wow. And so you just like you see TV and everything like that, but are you like just a normal passenger? You're assigned a seat?
You do have a seat. There's actually a nice. I mean, so the thing about Air Force One is it's run by the military, right? It's an Air Force plane, so everybody on there are Air Force military. So everything is very regimented. It's very official. It's very proper. When you come on, somebody takes your coat, hangs it up. A military officer does. You sit down. There's a card with the presidential seal that says Congressman Schock, on your desk.
Seat.
And it's basically, Air Force One is very nice, but as I tell people, it's more about the facilities that are on there. You have a full operating room if the president needs it, with physicians and surgeons and nurses standing by if he had a heart attack or needed a surgery. You have a bedroom for the president. You have the president's office. You have a boardroom. But it's not like super high-end luxe. It's not like, I tell this, that when I saw President Trump running for president and I saw his very fancy 757 decked out with, gold belt buckles and leather seats and very fancy, I thought, boy, he's going to be disappointed when he gets on Air Force One, because it's a beautiful plane. It's a 747, but it's not that luxe. It's like a nice RV. The seats are very nice, but it's not over the top glitzy. So you have the president's bedroom, you have the office, you have the operating room, you have the boardroom, then you have the VIP cabin, which is where I sat in, which is basically, you think of chairs that face desks, and they sit club seating, so you can sit and have conversations with each other. They fold back if you're on a long flight. You take a nap, and then you have the press cabin. And first is the president's press office, which basically barricades everything on the side of the president with the VIP cabin, and then you have the White House press office, his staff, and then you have the White House press corps, which are in basically coach seats in the back of the plane.
Oh, God.
And they're the ones who go off the back of the plane, and they cover the president. And then in the belly of the plane, where you'd think all the luggage would go for 400 passengers on a normal 747, they have a full galley kitchen down there. So, you have a steak or a hamburger, they're grilling it down there. And it's
really
some of the best food you can imagine.
Really?
Is on Air Force One.
And can you just get up and go, I want to go talk to the president, or not? That's not happening, right?
No, but
Secret
he came
Service.
around. Actually, so the Secret Service is almost, obviously the Secret Service is on the plane, but they're not, if you're in the VIP cabin, you're not being blocked, because you're kind of you're in the cone of
Right.
acceptance. But the president hangs out in his office primarily, and then in the case of this flight, Reggie Love, who was his body man, and a few of his staff played a few games of poker in the boardroom on the flight, and people are kind of just hanging out. So I could get up from my seat, and I went into the boardroom and talked to people there, and then went back to my seat and sat down. So you have some free flow. And then President Obama at the time came out and, hung out with us and, chit-chatted and so forth.
So if you're walking into Congress and you get a chill up your spine, at this point, do you ask how you got here? You're on Air Force One.
Yeah. Probably one of the coolest things was traveling with me was my predecessor in Congress, Ray LaHood, who became Obama's transportation secretary. And he looked at me and he says, "Aaron, pick up the phone." I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Right next to you, there's a phone." And I said, "What?" He goes, "You need to call your mom, or you need to call somebody." He said, "You don't know when you're going to get on Air Force One again." And so I picked up the phone, and somebody on the other line says, "Air Force One operator." And
no way.
And it's somebody it's the communications room on the plane. And so you say, "I want to call, Richard Schock, my father." And you don't even have to tell them phone number.
No way.
You want his cell phone or his home phone? They have access to every phone number. If they wanted to call Todd Ault and they wanted your cell phone number, they have access to it. They're not calling Verizon. They already have it, right?
No way, really?
Absolutely.
I always wondered how something happens and the president called the person. Like how they exchange the numbers. They
know how to get a hold of you.
Right.
Trust me, if they want to find you. But the coolest part is you hang up the phone, and then they call the person, and they say, "Mr. Ault, this is Air Force One operator. Congressman Schock is standing by for you." And then they put them on hold, and then they call your phone, and they say, "Congressman Schock, you have Mr. Schock on the phone." So it's like they don't hear me on the phone; they hear the Air Force One operator on the phone, which is kind of a kick. So
This is
I started
ridiculous.
calling everybody I could think of
Did you make
for
a
the
bunch of
next
calls?
hour on the phone. I called a few people.
That's just to say hello. That's incredible.
And to this day, of course, they tell that story. I'm in the supermarket and my phone rings and it's Air Force One operator, right? So those were neat things that you can't put a price on.
There's
in
no
terms
way.
of experiences that I was able to have. It was great.
And then you getting elected four times, right?
Yeah.
Was it by the fourth time? Was it just automatic for you, where you weren't thinking about it the same way? You knew everyone, but at that point,
some things are on autopilot. It becomes a lot easier, for example, to raise money. People are accustomed to supporting your reelection, so you're not having to meet new people that are supporters. The same farmer wants to have a farm cookout, a fundraiser for you at his house, and he likes to do it every fall, and so it just becomes an annual event. So there are things that in your infancy, in your first term, you're trying to figure out who are your friends, who are your supporters, what events are worth your time, what events aren't worth your time around your district. And by the time you're in your fourth term, you're kind of hitting on all cylinders. I will tell you, every cycle I ran, there were moments where I'd say, do I want to do this again? And I think what is hard when you're the gladiator in the arena is that your fans continue to cheer you on. Your fans say, hit him again, do it again, slay another dragon, and that's exhilarating. That's rewarding, but it's also daunting to think, okay, how long am I going to do this? And for me, it wasn't just a job; it was a mission, and I didn't just want to float and be one of 400. I wanted to be on the best committee. I wanted to be in leadership. I wanted to do, excel. And so, and then you're in your 30s, and you say, "Gee, do I want to do this in my 40s and 50s?"
But you at this time, by the time you got elected to your fourth term, you wanted to be. I mean, you had a young bug early to be an entrepreneur, so you kind of wanted to be in business,
right? And
being a congressman and being a businessman were kind of impossible.
Conflicted.
Right?
Yeah, you can't do business deals. You can buy real estate passively, but you can't really be doing development projects when you're in Congress. So, when you're high profile and you're moving fast, you become a target, which I was. Every cycle I'd be attacked. And ultimately, that's what led to my exit. Was I said, you know what, I can go do something different. I can, in some case, have a better quality of life if I'm not in Congress. And so that's when I ultimately decided to leave, was to go and pursue business and pursue things that I hadn't had the opportunity to pursue in my younger years.
Hey, we've been talking to Aaron Schock, Congressman Aaron Schock. I always tell people, like, well, he's not in Congress anymore. I said this to someone last night. I said, yeah, but once you get a title, you still call. I remember Governor Sununu, right?
Sure.
Them calling him Governor Sununu was like 10 years later. And
right.
I'm like, at the time, I'm like, why do they keep calling him governor? And then, of course, I learned that once you earn a title, you're always that person until you get your next title. Right. When you were in Congress, did you ever think I'll run for something else after that, or
naturally people will, say to you, oh, gee, you could be president, or you could be governor, or you could be senator. There was a moment in Illinois where I explored a governor's race.
Really?
And interestingly, not on my own, the state party chairman, the Illinois Republican Party chairman, called me up to Chicago with the board of the Illinois Republican Party. This was at the end of my first term. I'd only been in Congress for one term. And they said, we've looked around the state, and we've determined that we think the best candidate to win statewide in Illinois as a Republican is you.
Wow.
And that was really shocking to me, because these men were not just average schmoes. I mean, it was the head of major companies, the head of McDonald's board. It was like major Illinois corporations. I ultimately decided not to run, but I met with a lot of people. Ultimately, Bruce Rauner, who was a very wealthy individual, said he wanted to run. And I made a decision. I was not going to get into a holy war running in a primary where I had a guy with a lot of money that would attack me, and then I'd have to win in a general election after having been bloodied up in my primary. And so I decided not to run. I supported Bruce, and Bruce Rauner ended up winning the governorship.
We are out of time. Will you come back for a part two?
Sure,
I'd
love to.
Be a part
I'd
two.
love to.
There's so much more to talk about, but I want the last question to be, before we go to part two, did you write a book yet?
No.
Well, I feel a book coming. Right. Hey, it's Congressman Schock with Todd Ault. This is Ault-onomus. We'll see you for part 2. Take care. There's a reason for it.